welcome you to the Common Ground webinar series of Season 2 and Episode 5, brought to you by PMI India. I'm Vijay from Chennai, and along with me is Asha from Bangalore, and we'll be the moderators for this session. The topic for today's webinar is revisiting the road ahead for product design in the era of cloud and digital. And we're extremely pleased to have with us Mr. Ashish Khushu, who is the Chief Technology Officer at L&T Technology Services. Mr. Ashish drives the L&T's technology roadmap to develop IPs, products, platforms, and solutions to address strategic high-growth investment areas in digital engineering. Mr. Ashish has around 30 years of experience throughout in technical high-performance computing and product engineering services. With experience of working in both a product company and a services company and working in different cross-functional areas, it has helped Mr. Ashish to develop a holistic view of the dynamics of business, technology direction, and operational priorities. We're really excited to have a senior leader with us this evening. Without further ado, it is our pleasure to invite our extremely experienced and multifaceted guest speaker, Mr. Ashish, to this webinar. Over to you, Mr. Ashish.
Thank you. And a very good evening to all of you. Thank you, PMI, and thank you all the folks who are on the webinar today. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to get this opportunity to speak to you. I would like to start by just seeking a minute so that I could share my screen. And yes. Over the course of the next 25 to 30 minutes, I wanted to share with you a perspective of the dynamics of technology and the changes that this disruption is causing for all of us. We have often heard of people saying that digital disruption is going to cause a lot of changes in the customers' organizations. We've also heard a large number of people talking of where is the skills, people talking of reinventing, how we have to reinvent, etc., etc. And that puts me as well at risk because they say the senior you get, you to invest a lot more time reinventing yourself. Hopefully, in the next 25 odd minutes, I would be able to share some thoughts and perhaps some of them resonate with you. Two things before I get on to my presentation. One is that I think very important to understand what Corona has done to us. What it has done to you and me is it has again reaffirmed and reiterated the fact that we are not any further away from the big picture. The big picture of what global economy does, of how countries buy, how countries are interlinked with each other, all of that which we used to think as Gyan is now coming back to hit us and tell us it was not Gyan. It's impacting our salaries, it's impacting our variable components, it's impacting our bonuses. So we are in a highly interconnected world. We are in a world where the big picture is very, very, very important to understand. We can't wish away somebody talking about strategy in a global world any longer. We ought to be tuned into what's happening. It's impacted us in the last few months, and look how it's impacted all of us in a big way. So there's nothing like, oh, that's a big picture thing, so let's not bother about it. We better be bothered about it. It's just shown us how our financials, our insecurities on the professional front can get impacted by what happens at a global stage. So we are really very integral to the global economy, and therefore so are our professions. So the second thing that I would like to keep in context is the project managers themselves. And I think maybe an analogy to when you build a house. When you look at building a house, you have three main stakeholders. There's an architect, who designs the house, but he does not construct the house. The construction of the house is left to people who are workers who are specializing in something, somebody in masonry or carpentry, plumbing or electricity, etc., etc. So the architect designs, the workers put it together to the design that the architect has envisaged, and the budget and the end and the financier is the person who's funding the whole thing. That is either you or me or our parents who have sponsored. So there are three people who are involved, and there are three different point of views, and the synergies of how to reach the goal in line with the budget, construction schedule, and the architect, the architecture of the whole house. All of those things have to be brought together. And that's something very similar to project management. It decides the success or failure of whatever we do. I believe that it is one of the very critical roles that anybody has to make a project or a dream or a vision or a strategy come to fruition or to be successful. So project management is extremely, extremely important. And in a world where we want to seek global leadership, the global leadership will not come through anything else except for reaching quality standards of the highest order, global levels of quality standards. And that does not happen through architects, that does not happen through engineers, that happens through strictest possible adherence to processes, to tools, and that's what project managers can do. And therefore, I think PMI has a very, very important role to play. All of you have a very important role to play. Now, keeping this background in mind, let's see what's happening. And as I shared, the topic is about what's happening to product design in this industry 4.0, digital, et cetera. We all know the jargons. So let's now look at what is the arena in which we are going to play in the next few years and how that is going to link and impact the jobs that we are doing. So now this is what it looks like. Now, these are not my figures. These are the figures which are largely, portrayed by everybody else. It says that the projected GDP ranking would be as follows. You can all read the screen. It actually shows that between China and India, by 2030, you perhaps would be having 30 to 35% of the global GDP. Between India and China, all the countries would possibly contribute perhaps maybe 30 to 35% of the global GDP. And now if you start looking at what happens there, you also have the world's largest population in this belt, about 25 to 30%. And the per capita is going to be low. So the question is, if this is the shift that is going to happen, will products and services be designed for the biggest market that is emerging between India and China, which has per capita income which is very low, which perhaps would be about $10,000 to $12,000, 5 times lesser than the developed countries, and aspirational. So will products, will services be designed for this region over the next few years? So how would it look like? As I said, do keep in mind that whatever we do, whether we are in the services business, whether we are in the manufacturing business, we are no longer away from the big picture. So if Apple or Qualcomm or Samsung, if you would have seen the papers today, or Reliance Jio is creating platforms, why are they doing it? And how does it impact us? That's the point. And some of these indicators tell you that. Very, very interesting. 4.8 billion internet users worldwide and 10.1 billion mobile telephone subscriptions. Now, if you were to have 10 billion people using mobiles, and they're going to access information from mobiles, and why should it come as a surprise to us that everything will be accessible through apps? Should not be. So these are the connections that you get to see, and they're very, very obvious. 54% of people will live in Asia Pacific. You can't therefore design big cars for US or Germany all the time. I mean, people won't have the type of money that those countries have. In Asia Pacific, which will be 54% of people living here. Therefore, products and services and strategies of organizations will cater to this market over the next 10 years. So it's not really a surprise that whatever Mr. Ambani is trying to do, or Samsung and Apple are coming to India and trying to set up manufacturing organizations. This is how the world will look like, plus minus a couple of years, maybe 1 or 2 years here and a couple of percentage points up and down. But this is how it looked like. This is the landscape, and I think all of us will be alive by 2030 and well within our professional, either in the middle or the high of our professional growth. But this is what we will be seeing. And this is important. Technology is going to be ubiquitous. Everybody would have access to technology through the cell phones that you have. 10 billion cell phones for a population of 8 billion. Everybody using cell phone tools, content, consumption, apps, interactivity, etc., etc. Global mobility at its highest. I mean, well, saying this in this year looks like an oxymoron, but I mean, things will get back. But look at the 2 points on the left and the right side of the screen. 6,000 languages, 20 languages for 50% of the population. So is it a surprise that your customers or our customers will come back and say, look, if I am going to access 54% of the global population in India, Asia, Pacific, and maybe another 10-15% in Africa, there are 20 languages for 50% of the population. So can we have localization in the local languages? And their literacy is a big issue. So can it be voice enabled? Speaking does not require great education. Typing does. And mobility. People will move easily from one place to the other. Highly interconnected. So growing population, growing per capita, emerging market, global mobility, people mixing around with each other a lot more of trade, a lot more of design, a lot more of interaction. 20 languages take care of 50% of the population of the world. That means you have to go beyond English. We have to start using vernaculars. We have to customize whatever we do for those people. But then a large number of those people are not literate. So maybe voice enabled. So is that why Amazon is spending so much money on Alexa and trying to grab the market of voice as a standard? These things are all over the place. I'm not sharing anything with you which is special to it. This is there in the public domain. It's just that we need to start putting these things together a little bit more because they impact us a lot more. These are the things that drive and influence product design or service offerings. And sometimes we don't understand why people are doing apps, or we don't understand why Mr. Ambani is building a platform. But suddenly, to my mind, it makes ample sense that you have a population in India which has a per capita income of $3,000, which has a global penetration of technology which is very low, which can go up to $50,000 per capita. So 20 times growth, why not create a platform? So when you look at 2030 from a technology perspective, this is a given. I don't think there is any debate on this. Everything will be connected and it will be real time. It will be always on. You don't question why electricity is at your home. You don't question how water gets to your place. Internet is like that. It'll be powering everything all the time, 24/7. You already are seeing it. Every device, every component, every car, every tractor, everything will be connected. Anything which has an electrical or a digital pulse will be connected. Absolutely. Artificial intelligence will be all pervasive. You've heard about it from many, many people. No brainer. It'll be everywhere because when you connect stuff, what do you get? You get data. And when you have to process the data, you want the right information out of the data. So there'll be artificial intelligence all over the place, predicting, helping us, etc., etc. Robos. Already you see a lot of robos. They've been there for a very, very long period of time. Vacuum cleaners as robos is available for $10,000 on Flipkart or Amazon. Mechatronics has always been there. Robos and surgical. So they'll appear everywhere to assist you at your work or etc. And that brings me to this slide. When you have such a huge pervasive adoption of technology, it will lead to standardization. After all, vehicles drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road, whichever country you are in, but that's a standard. Electricity you get at home is a certain frequency. The fuel that you get in your, which we all use in our vehicles, has a certain octane number. Everything we do, anything that we do, in our offices, there is a standard. Everything gets standardized. Large amount of adoption of any technology or any solution or product leads to standardization. And in turn, standardization leads to commoditization, because if you're building anything which is standard, then you can source the bill of material or supply. You could have a supply chain which supplies to many people, and they get the volume and you get cheaper stuff. And therefore, standardization leads to commoditization, and commoditization leads to more standardization, and commoditization brings down the cost of acquisition. But that does not mean that because everything is commoditized, there is no great value you can develop. It leads to specialization. For example, a very, very simple example. You take an Android phone. Why do you buy one Android phone over the other? What is that one simple thing that you see in that phone which is different? Some people focus on the camera, some people focus on the UI, some people focus on facial recognition. So in a world which has standardization and commoditization, it encourages innovation a lot more. It encourages people to specialize in one or two areas which stand out in your product or in your offering, which therefore compels the customer to buy. Now, one big change that is going to happen, which is going to drive some of these things, is going to be 5G. I don't think we should bother too much about, we don't have to bother too much about the technicalities, but suffice it to say that a 2-hour movie can be downloaded on your phone in less than a minute or less than half a minute. Now, if that's going to happen, if you will have devices which can download music or download films in less than a minute or half a minute, what will happen to the pen drives? What will happen to Ghana? What will happen to radio cities or radio FMs? What has happened to the CD market? What has happened to those tape markets? One aspect of technology has just killed the other aspect. How many of you have not been able to, how many of you remember the last time that when you were downloading a video on TikTok or Hot Shots or whatever, there was buffers? It's reduced. 5 years back, buffering was, it's buffering only for 10 seconds, it's fine. But now, even if it buffers for less than a second, you feel irritated. First of all, it just does not buffer. I play music through Ghana while I'm on my, or Spotify while I'm driving, and it just streams, and that's not even 5G. So I think what happens is that that's what 5G is going to do. So now let's go back. You have bandwidth, which is going to enable tremendous amount of computational, tremendous amount of data to be transferred to any device in real time. And the devices have to have the right type of memory, right type of power to consume and play it back. And when you're going to play back a movie, you can't have a display which has got an old resolution. So the display ought to be fantastic. And the display, therefore, has to be very good because of consumer experience. And all this is being fueled by 5G, and all of this has to be bought by people whose per capita income in India, in this Indo-Asia Pacific market, is lesser, but in US and Europe is more. So you have to cater to two different type of product strategies, something for this market and something for that market. This is how technologies and the happenings around us, the economics, the technology evolution come together. So when somebody designs a product, architects a product, he just does not do the product architecture in a manner that is independent of these things. So when a customer comes back and says, this is what I want, or this is what I don't want, he has these things in mind. If you're manufacturing a pump or a compressor or a car or a plane or a device, or you're offering services in the IT industry, remember, these are the ingredients which are going in the product strategy. They influence the way people design. And therefore, when I or you or anybody else as a project manager is looking at a project to execute, we ought to know what is influencing, what were the inputs for the project to have taken the type of a shape that so seems to be otherwise very nebulous. Now with all of this, the era of immersive interactions and experiences. You've heard of VR, AR for 25, 30 years. I got trained on some of these virtual reality gadgets as early as 95, 96. But today, gaming is a possibility because of 5G, because of compute capabilities, because of software capabilities. You already see, if you have teenagers at home, you will see that 3, 4 of them get together and watch a movie together through a Netflix app. Or sometimes there are shows where you're watching something on television and the children are sitting on this side and giving live feedback to the content creator. And the young generation, which is consuming technology, has much higher expectations because they're starting at a base of usage which is much higher than the maturity that we have seen. So you are now going to enter an era of immersive interaction and experiences. So the next time a customer comes back and says, I want excellent user experience, we ought to take him seriously. We ought to take him very, very seriously. And when he comes back and says, look, my user experience is going to determine the volume of the market or brand strategy, you have to understand that these are why he's so concerned. And then the user experience for my customer starts with me. And I can't give him user experience till I really don't understand what are his compelling drivers. So it's a participation age that we are entering. Everybody will be connected. Everybody has a device. Everybody can give feedback. Everybody can comment. Everybody can do whatever they want to do. And that creates complications. That creates complication of legible data. That creates complications of identity, that security of what is right, what is wrong, all this type of stuff. But we will not go into the legalities and anything else. But when I talk of participation age from our perspective, it means that in the next 4 to 5 years, your engineers also will start directly talking to the engineers of your customers. Or they will start talking to your end customers directly and interact on a forum. So you can't have a project management strategy or an execution strategy which says, oh, my team is going to talk only to me and only through me. Sorry, not going to happen. There will be multiple channels of people talking to multiple other people in the other side of the fence through various modes, and you won't even know. Which means that when we are going to execute or when we are going to do any work that we have to do, we have to have a very, very good understanding of the nuances of technology, nuances of the project, nuances of the customer, nuances of how to deal with different type of people, because people can create content, give the feedback to your customers or put it on social media. Your customers can give feedback about you on social media, on LinkedIn or anything of that side. So that's the negative side. The positive side is that in the participation age, a large number of people can collaborate with each other to solve problems of innovation, let's say in open source. Or your customers and you could create a team where people ideate over problems. So the dynamics of participation age are going to be very, very different. I won't even get there. When everybody is going to contribute huge amount of information, even a small bit, every building is connected, every plant is connected, every product is connected, everything is connected. What will it generate? It will generate data. So we're really talking exabytes, much, much more than that. Megabytes and gigabytes are gone. Those days are gone. Now, here comes a very interesting point. The point is that when you didn't have information, when I started my career 30 years back, and the customers would still like me, provided I would give them the information that was relevant to them. And at that time, there was no net. So I had to go through manuals and photocopy or study or do many things and go to them and say, look, this is the data that you want. And he would like or dislike or approve or disapprove, depending upon the relevance that I had, because I was getting him information from data which was scarce or were not easily available. The same happens today. There is so much data that is available. There's so much data today. So much that the customer still needs you. For the same reason, can you understand your customer better, and can you get him the relevant data from the right sources and present it to him in a manner that makes sense to him? 30 years back, no data, the role was the same. Today, too much data, the role is the same. He'll still like you. Look at yourself or look at us. If you look at what's happening in the news or technology area, you don't want to go through everything. I'm sure all of us have those sources of truth that we think are the right sources, and we just go to those sources to get the right information, and there it is. There it is. That's what I wanted to know. So one way of looking at data is, too much information available, what will we do? The other way of information is, what will we do? The other way of looking at data is that there's so much data that there will be tools like AI, etc., which will get the right information out and give it to the customer. That still does not remove my importance from the equation, or your importance, or anyone of ours importance. I still continue to remain. In fact, I believe we'll become all the more relevant to the customer because he needs that right information at the right time. And that can only come if we are very finely in sync with our customer's strategy and goal and vision. This is an important slide from my perspective, and I'll come to we will connect the dots towards the last two slides. Look, I personally don't think that skilling is a bit of a problem. I know this may sound a bit of an issue in terms of this may evoke strong reactions, or this may appear to be a bit, off the normal, but I really don't think skilling is a problem. We have grown to be a 160 billion plus industry, creating skills, creating people who know skills. We never knew mainframe banking, but we still created resources for people who could work on mainframes in the banking industry. And the era has changed. Y2 came, it had an inflection point, and the 2000s saw IoT, the internet, browser-based apps, Java, client-server, and the last 10 years saw AI, app stores, mobile apps, big data, mechatronics, autonomy in a car, IaaS, infrastructure as a service, network, and you could see how things have evolved. The 2020s, in my view, will belong to a very, very different set of technologies. If you see from Y2K to 2000, there was a rewrite of software. Software which was written for mainframe and for client server moved to browser-based applications or browser-based solutions or applications which were built for the network or designed for the network. And now you're going to a stage which is a very different stage where there's a lot more maturity in certain domains and there's a lot more data that is available, and therefore you have a cloud type of a deployment which is coming in. AI is going to become pervasive. AI is getting into embedded SoCs, and apps are going to be very intelligent. I believe that in this next 10 years, 5 to 10 years, we will also see another revolution in terms of rewriting of software. The software that we wrote for a client server or a browser-based access is not the type of software that will give us scale in the type of situation that we talked of. It will not give us scale for a cloud-based deployment which has to take care of massive scalability when millions of people are going to access your access and conduct transactions on the web. Millions of them. And for that, you have to write applications for the cloud. You don't port them. Porting from one deployment strategy to another is a short-term view. You have to start writing applications, which means you have to rewrite. Now, many people come back and say, oh, why would anybody rewrite? Look, we did rewrite, right? In the 1990s to 2000, we did rewrite. Then from 2000s to 2010, there was a rewrite. But this time, the rewrite is going to be again there, which throws up newer opportunities. And why would that rewrite happen? It would happen because the computational power, if your devices or your machines or your products are going to be connected all the time, are going to be intelligent, are going to do real-time processing, are going to handle tremendous amount of scale, it ought to have a chip or a CPU or a SoC inside. And what's happening there? The transistor density is a measure by which you figure out the power of the device. It can do 1,000. You already have processors which can have 1,000 plus simultaneous hardware threads. That means, theoretically speaking, 1,000 plus instructions can be executed in parallel. So the power of the compute is there. The power of 5G, which gives you higher bandwidth, is there. So when the computational power is going up, the compute capability of transferring data and processing data is going up. You need software that has to be written to take care of the underlying computational power that is available to you. And in this case, computational, I mean compute plus the network bandwidth that is available. And that's why I believe that this rewrite of software, evolution of software architecture will happen. This is going to change the way people design products. I'm no longer going to design a product which is going to be a car. Let's take a car, or let's take a phone, or let's take a smart home, or let's take a smart building. I'm not going to design any building or any car which does not keep in mind what will happen if the car, when the car gets connected, what are the type of services that that car has to offer. That's what Tesla does. Everybody else will do the same. That's exactly what iPhone does. You take an iPhone or you take a Samsung. They don't sell you through just apps. They sell you through user experience. And the user experience is multitude of things. It is the way I interact with the system, the intelligence in the system, the rate at which the system responds to me, the intelligence that the system shows in the way it responds to me. Whether it's a machine, whether it's a car, whether it's a product, a compressor or a pump, or whether it is industrial equipment, or whether it's a consumer device, or it's a telephone, or it's a smart TV or a refrigerator at home, it all has electronics, which is very, very powerful. So therefore, when you have the underlying infrastructure, which is very good, the software capabilities, that's why people talk of microservices, software capabilities are going to come. Now let's put all the dots together. You have an economy which is growing very fast. The power of purchase, higher amount of purchase and volumes will shift to a certain size. So you have to design products for an economy which per capita income is low. In the next 10 years, you will see internet all over the place, always on, tremendous amount of bandwidth through 5G. Computational power is becoming very good. It will have artificial intelligence embedded into the chips with the power to do many, many things proactively. People are going to use, all of us are going to use devices and are going to use apps a lot. It has to be voice enabled or localized for the language, because that's the only way a very large section of the population in many countries would use the services of the product or avail the benefit of the features of the product. And therefore, if you have to build to scale, and if you have to build a product which will be able to take care of such performance expectation, you have to rewrite the software so that it can be deployed in a manner that it exploits the underlying hardware infrastructure or the compute infrastructure or the network infrastructure. which now means that you have to write the software for the cloud. And when you see some of these things here, that's why you see the relevance of edge services, the relevance of gateways, microservices, service mesh, build, release. This is a very general purpose architecture which I have just picked up from Google for this particular session. It applies to anything. If you're building a car and you want to offer services on a car, this is the way you'll have to build it. This is a white paper. This is like your physics equations or 3 laws of Newton. This is how it will look like, irrespective. Now, it's very important, and again and again, I'm coming back to you. From a project management perspective, it's very important to understand which part of the services is your team executing and where does it sit in the overall scheme of things. If the customer is building something for the cloud and he comes back and tells you, oh, you're not scaling, you've got a real problem. You better be proactive in understanding if the product is going to be deployed or accessed through people who are going to be on the cloud. What does scaling mean? Scaling does not mean 10 people or 30 people simultaneously accessing. It could possibly mean millions of people simultaneously accessing an app. And the response time of the app or the service that is given to one person when there are only 10 people accessing and the same person when millions of people are accessing should be the same. Now, how do you build that type of excellence in your projects? Go back to slide 1. We can't go back and say, look, we don't know what the big picture is. We better be aware of the big picture. The fact that we were not bothered about the big picture is just hit us so badly. So I don't think, again, and I'm sort of connecting and mixing up here and there, but I again don't think reskilling is an issue. When people say reskilling on what? Reskilling on what? On Java? On AI? On what? Provided you know where the world is moving towards. So in many, many ways, it's an inflection point. It's not going to be incremental. The incremental skill gain that you want to have or incremental involvement in the project from a quality perspective, oh, I've done my parts, I've done a quality, I've done this, given, it won't work. The way products are getting designed is a very, very different is a very different paradigm as I was trying to share with you in the last slide. And this brings me to my last slide. You're going to get back to an era of systems. A phone that you have at home, or your child's iPad, or a Nintendo, or anything. Let's take Netflix or Roku, or an OTT app that you see. Let's take an OTT app that you see, or Flipkart, or Myntra, or anything that you use. Oh, I've pressed, I've bought. That's the user experience you see. But what is going behind that user experience is a very, very complex piece of software, which is enterprise software, security, identity, approvals, web applications, app stores, supply chain, customer relationship management, middleware, databases, all of them linked very tightly to the hardware. If I write a software which is fantastic and the underlying hardware is not good enough, what would be the user experience that you will get? Zilch. And if I have real estate in terms of humongous amount of compute capabilities available on my product, or electronics capabilities available on my product, and the software is not good enough, what is the user experience you will get? So when we talk of user experience, nowhere do we understand that increasingly, and this is the other part which I strongly believe in, and at least when I say strongly, when I've shared this with my customers in various forums, I believe that you are entering into an era where you will talk systems. It does not matter. Embedded software, embedded hardware, SoC, VLSI, FPGA, middleware, web applications, ERP, CRM, all of them have to come together, tightly integrated, and that is how you will give the person fantastic user experience. Otherwise, user experience is no longer UI. There's a difference between user interface and UI, user experience. User interface is a website which gives you fantastic, good-looking, colors and various widgets. User experience is not that. User experience is how well it allows you to navigate, how promptly does it give you intuitively prompts you to different relevant information, how well it captures your history, how well it protects your security and identity, how well it interacts with you through intelligence. So user experience is very different than UI. Both are not the same, and UI is a part of user experience. UI will contribute to user experience, but it is not the only thing. It's one of the very small things. So now when you have a customer who's coming and building a product, he is talking of user experience. And user experience is all of these things put together. So today, what's happening in sum total, the digital revolution, or I personally don't like using these words, but I mean, that's the way larger people are able to relate to. In my view, a digital infrastructure is being prepared and is being laid. Digital infrastructure. That digital infrastructure sits on the telecommunication pipe, and the telecommunication pipe, which is 3G or 4G right now, is going to go to 5G, therefore will give you tremendous amount of power and flexibility to transfer data to and fro interactively, etc., etc. That digital infrastructure will allow products and services to be offered to customers in every industry for whatever reason. And the customer will buy those products and services based on user experience. And all the products, whether it is an industrial product, an automotive product, a construction product, any product which has a digital heartbeat will have software embedded into it, and therefore it will be connected. And any product that is connected will focus on giving user experience to their set of people or stakeholders. And the user experience of that particular product will not be just one layer of software or two layers of technology. It's an integrated stack. So a customer will go back and say, I want to build a refrigerator in 2025. And that refrigerator perhaps will have an LCD display, it will have food menus being showcased, etc., etc. And that's the way the design will start. You will start the design keeping in mind the user preferences. But the same applies to an industrial equipment as well. Though it may not be, it has different architectural requirements in terms of ruggedity, the way it gets used, the extreme conditions, but the elements of user experience will still be there. That's how it goes down. And now, whereas we are concerned, people on this forum, myself and many others, it's very, very important to understand. We are getting into an era where the way the products are getting designed are influenced by some of the things that I've shared with you. They're getting influenced by the larger economic landscape that we are seeing emerging. It's getting influenced by the fact that the world is becoming highly integrated, highly dependent, highly homogeneous. It depends upon, therefore, it means that whatever you do, whatever product or services that we offer to a customer or a customer wants to offer to their customers, it has to be of global standards. Which means that I can't give great service to my customer when I can't give him great quality of experience if I don't understand what is he trying to do. If I'm running a marathon and you're going to help me run a marathon, I would like you to give me the type of liquid I need as required by me after I've done 20 kilometers. There is a need for certain inputs in a certain journey. And from a project management perspective, or from a software development perspective, or from any engineer's perspective, when you talk of what would it take, these are the type of things that is going to determine the type of jobs we are going to get, the expectations that customers have. So digital and industrial impact on us is in these ways that the products are going to get designed from a user experience perspective in an economy which is highly integrated, highly globalized, and products which will cater to the type of scale and integrated and performance of the highest possible order. And to do that, and to give the type of experience to our customers, we need to keep the entire picture in mind and then figure out what is the critical and important role that we play as we deliver our very small projects, because the dots do get connected as the projects reach completion. That's all from my side. And I've just tried to share the experience that I've gathered from all the customers and all the customer meetings. I hope it makes some sense to you and you're able to resonate with whole of it, hopefully, or otherwise parts of it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was quite amazing information to digest on a Saturday evening. So you talked about being in an interconnected world, and that brings to mind the Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution. And if you have some tips for the project leaders on how to cope with these changes, that would be in the form of enablers and disruptors, we would be happy to hear.
I think with complete humility, people on the call are far more experienced in terms of their domain of what it takes to be a great project manager, because I don't think I'll be able to guide them too much on that. But I think there are a couple of guiding principles which I follow. One is that we should not get taken up by many jargons that come all over the place. The IT industry, we have a whole lot of acronyms and jargons which sort of mystify many things. One is that when you talk of Industrial 4.0 or a digital or AI or any one of these things, do remember that it's evolutionary. Things are changing. Things are growing. They are maturing. It's not that we have reached the final destination. It cannot be. It's an evolution. The more we understand the nuances of what Industry 4.0 or AI or the net or whatever I shared with you, a lot more of it, when you understand the nuances and simplify, you'll be able to figure out a way for yourself. I think what's very, very important is that you have to understand what are the new technologies which are coming in and why. Why older technologies are going away, because they are not required, they can't cater to the requirements that the new set of products and services require. If you understand that, automatically I believe you will start choosing the right type of your right type of a path to get more details, etc., etc. But important to remove the cloud from so many jargons and dive a little bit deeper and get to the granular aspects of what it constitutes, and then I think everybody will find their own answer. But quality is the key. Absolutely. You cannot be a global player in anything if you don't have quality standards of the global quality standards. And you can't get quality till you don't understand the overall perspective in which you are engaged. Sometimes we feel our job is very small, but that small part could be the most critical part in the overall machine. So that's all I think I have to share for the PMI champions on the industry part.
So again, another component of this Industry 4.0 or fourth industrial revolution is the digital twin, a virtual replica of physical devices. So any practical application? Lots of them.
Too many of them. Again, the word has changed. Please indulge me, and my request to the people on the call, just indulge me for a minute. Many people come back and say, oh, IoT is new. Really? When is the first time you guys accessed ATM? Early 90s? What do you think an ATM was? How was the ATM authenticating you and swiping you and giving you money and deciding? And where was the ATM getting money from? And where was your account? So, look, the thing is that some of these things have to be, again, you need to go back. And digital twins have existed in various shapes, size, forms in the history of industrial revolution or in the history of industrialization many years back, decades back, 2 decades back. Simply put, if there is a product or a subsystem, You create that, you take that subsystem. Earlier, you used to create a physical prototype. Creating a physical prototype used to be very expensive, very time consuming. Therefore, you started modeling that physical prototype in a computer screen through a CAD/CAM model, would apply kinematics or dynamics to it, do crash analysis, and look at how the system performs, do a lot more of simulations. And then once you know that you've got 100% or 90% accuracy on the software model, you go to a physical model. So it has existed in various shapes, size, forms in the automotive industry, in the manufacturing industry, in consumer electronics industry. In the last 10 years, it has now become cheaper, and now people are going to slightly more complex systems. More complex systems means if there is a heavy-duty machinery which has many mechanisms, it has a pump, it has a blower, it has, and if you want to understand the working of different components of a larger system with various subsystems, that started happening. It does not happen too much right now because it's very complex. You have to create a virtual mock-up in a software, then you have to apply the mechanical attributes, you have to apply the physics, the chemical attributes, the physics attributes, then modulate the performance before you really send it to the prototyping age. My team itself has created a digital twin for various machineries, about 12 to 13 different industrial equipments like compressor, pumps, actuators over the last 3 years. It is very much possible, doable, and it's happening. What is not happening right now is there is people who want to look at how does the overall manufacturing plant look like in a simulated manner. When you say simulation, you don't mean simulation like in a gaming simulation. You mean simulation which will which will be as close to its real life performance. That's something people have started doing. That's a recent phenomenon. It'll take some time to mature, but digital twin for small parts and small products and now larger assemblies is very much possible and is happening.
Thank you. There have been a lot of questions from the participants. It's really overwhelming to see so much of participation. Just in the interest of time, we'll go through a few from the participants. There's one from Mr. Sabarisan. This is in relation to the 5G that you touched upon in the presentation. So 4G in itself in India is yet to deliver its full potential. Now there are talks about 5G, which is another huge ecosystem. Do you think we are ready for 5G, or how do we plan ourselves to get ready for 5G?
Yeah, that's a very relevant and interesting question, but do we have a choice? The fact is that some technologies come and they just, you buy a new phone, do you really require one? The old phone also suffices. So sometimes it's a very tricky question. But from a 5G perspective, I think the subject is very highly specialized and very difficult to answer in a very short period of time. But I think 5G is here. 4G and 5G will coexist. That's the way it is. 3G and 4G have coexisted. They will coexist for another 2 or 3 years. Then when 4G and 5G comes, 4G and 5G will coexist for another 3 to 4 years before the quantum jump happens. So are we ready for 5G? It has multiple answers. From a telecommunication infrastructure perspective, yes. Are all devices 5G ready? No. Are people building devices which will be 5G ready? Yes. That's what should start hitting the market in a year and a half down the line. But are there applications or are there industrial use cases which are 5G ready? That's not there yet in a very big manner. So I think that will take 2 to 3 years from now. So the 5G infrastructure ready, that's the telecom players, the networks, the routers, the switches, the 5G devices, partly ready. Some of them are coming. A robust app infrastructure or solution infrastructure which will actually exploit the power of 5G. I think that, in my humble opinion, may take another year and a half or so because there are multiple issues on that. But 4G and 5G are going to coexist for another 3 to 4 years before 5G takes over completely.
Thank you. The next one comes from Sunil. And he wants to know, how does one align with the needs of localization versus globalization?
I that's a very I won't be able to answer it directly because it's a very, very wide.
I mean, in terms of the products that L&T, designs, so do you take into consideration the local aspects of the technology or the products, how it is relevant to the Indian market and how it is for the global audience?
Maybe, no, I don't get I'm sorry, but I still not got the question very correctly. Maybe I could, if I have some more details from a relevance perspective or which industry or what products, then maybe I'll be able to share a little bit more. But directly, I'm not able to relate to. I'm sorry for that, Sunil.
No problem. So because we have a huge project management community and most people who are on this webinar today are project managers in themselves, I think it would be very interesting to hear from you. What are some of the major challenges you see for project managers nowadays?
I think I won't say project managers. I won't say only project managers. I think all of us in general. When I gave you the example of a house, or when I gave you the example of example of a house, you have an architect, you have a person who's financing, and there's a project manager who's putting all of these three things together. We often, and largely, almost a humongously large number of people do not see the work we do in the context of the overall scheme. I will give you an example. If you have an engineer, I think there would be many people on this call who may not be from the IT industry, so I'm sorry for that, but allow me to give you this example. Let's say I am working on a small chip, and that's an embedded chip, and I'm writing a device driver. And the device driver's performance is not good. His approach will be, I've done a device driver, I've given, so what? It had a quality issue, it passed the 99% threshold, it's done. But look, it's going to go into a larger project. It's going to go into a larger product. And that's one of the very key elements. I think the biggest challenge we all have is that we do not make an attempt to see the larger picture in which we are doing a small piece of work. If we start looking at the larger picture and see that my small component, what role my small component has to play, I think the equations start falling in place. Otherwise, it is, I'm just doing my job, kar liya, kya farak padta hai, let me go. And that's where you start compromising on quality. That's where you start compromising your understanding of the customer's requirement. That's where you start compromising on your deliverables. That's where you start compromising personally and professionally on your enhancement as a true business guy understanding. Now let's take a car. Do you think there's one guy who makes a car? There are perhaps thousand vendors, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, who come together and give small components which come together and gives you a car. Now, we need to understand the larger context in which we work, and once we have that appreciation, I personally believe, and it takes a lot of effort and motivation, it's easier said than done. But if we start looking at the big picture and see what role I have to play in that I think starts unraveling many things. That starts giving you an idea of what role, what importance does your project play? How important is delivery to you? What are the motives of the customer? Why is the customer doing what he's doing? Why has he chosen us? Why am I important? And when you start asking these questions and understanding these questions, I think you're on a path of self-evolution and self-learning all by yourself. I think that's it's a philosophical answer, but very highly doable. The great guys in your company, the great performers actually do it. And that's why you have a pyramid, right? The guys who are rising up are the guys who are doing this all the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ashish Khushu. Moving on to the PGU claim course.